Summary. For centuries, the abuse of alcohol has created problems for the family. Some people believed that alcoholic beverages endangered mental and physical health. They also thought drunkenness helped some people commit crime. In 1917, Congress approved the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibited the manufacture and sale of alcohol and took effect in 1920. Congress also passed the Volstead Act, which established penalties for prohibition violations. The result of prohibition was not fewer people drinking, but more, as people thought the law violated their right to live according to their own standards. Government grew bigger trying to enforce the laws, and crime increased. Gangs provided most of the alcoholic beverages and warred with other gangs for control of the liquor trade. It took a while for Americans to realize that the prohibition laws and the war on alcohol did more harm than good. So in 1933, prohibition was repealed with the passage of the 21st Amendment. Now let's consider drugs and the effect of the war on drugs. Some people believe that drugs endanger mental and physical health. Some people also believe that drug use helps people commit crime. Yet for centuries, people have used and abused drugs. Drug use has not come down as a result of laws, but has increased, and along with it came an increase in crime activity, and gang violence. Possibly it is a rebel nature within man to want to do that which is forbidden, i.e. 56 or more in a 55 speed limit zone. This book is not intended to condone the use of drugs or alcohol, but to raise awareness that the laws which outlaw drugs are causing more harm than good to nearly everyone, and costing the taxpayers billions of dollars annually, not only to incarcerate the drug offenders, but also billions extra on enforcing these laws and in welfare to affected families. These laws need to be repealed and many prisoners set free. It is also intended to highlight some of the problems with the prison system. There is evidence that releasing nonviolent drug offenders would save money on corrections because the economic cost of their offending is so low. If drug sales were restricted, as is alcohol, so that they may only be sold to persons aged 21 and older, they could be sold at the convenience store along with cigarettes and alcohol. Then, what now sells for $20 because it is illegal would probably be less than $1. Instantly, the drug dealers would be out of business. The need to commit crime to support a $100 per day habit would be drastically reduced by the affordability. The $5 billion the president promised one of the Central American countries for them to curtail their drug supply line would be saved as the incentive to export into the United States would be gone. People who are now sniffing paint for a buzz and for fear of the law could get a safer and cheaper high. Drugs which require the use of a needle could be restricted, but motivation to use such would be drastically diminished by the availability of other drugs. 20% of the police department would not be needed and could find employment doing something more useful. The Coast Guard and Border Patrol would no longer have to worry about drug smugglers since the market would no longer be profitable. Over 50% of the budget for incarceration could be saved. That savings could go a long way toward reducing the national debt or just be money the taxpayers save. Government exists to protect us from each other. Where government has gone beyond its limits is in deciding to protect us from ourselves. Ronald Reagan. For nothing is more destructive of respect for the government and the law of the land than passing laws which cannot be enforced. It is an open secret that the dangerous increase of crime in this country is closely connected with this. Albert Einstein. Totalitarianism is when people believe they can punish their way to perfection. Newt Gingrich. Penalties against possession of a drug should not be more damaging to an individual than the use of the drug itself. Jimmy Carter. From as early as 1912, the U.S. has tried to export its domestic drug policy and forced other countries to emulate it, even though it has been anything but a model of success. This could be one reason much of the world hates the U.S., as their crime rate and prison population also increase. Suicide rates are higher among families which have a family member incarcerated, as are divorce rates. People imprisoned are twice as likely to be abusive after being released. Largely through jury nullification, prohibition was repealed, and the crimes associated with prohibition ceased. It is time to end the war on drugs. If a person is going to do drugs, experience has shown that they will regardless of the law, and some will because of the laws against it. Why should the taxpayer reward them with free housing while struggling to pay the extra taxes required to do that? Consider the following. Words of the Founding Fathers concerning jury nullification. Jurors should acquit, even against the judge's instruction, if exercising their judgment with discretion and honesty, they have a clear conviction the charge of the court is wrong. Alexander Hamilton, 1804. It is not only the juror's right, but his duty to find the verdict according to his best understanding, judgment, and conscience, though in direct opposition to the instruction of the court. John Adams, 1771. I consider trial by jury as the only anchor yet imagined by man by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution. Thomas Jefferson, 1789. If you are called for jury duty, know your rights and responsibilities. You can go to www.fija.org for more information. FIJA stands for Fully Informed Jury Association. Costs of incarceration. But wait a minute. Is it actually free housing for the inmate? If the inmate is classified at above the poverty level and the court has not exempted the inmate, the state can take from his assets the cost of incarceration, which ranges from $23 per day to $65 per day. The court costs and the cost of prosecuting him until his assets are reduced to the poverty level. Federal prisons only collect costs of incarceration, which can be as much as $23,000 per year. While incarcerated, an inmate is not eligible for Medicare or Medicaid, but may be charged for his medical care. Liens against retirement income may be assessed, and the state can take any inheritance he receives up to 20 years after being released. The 14th Amendment, which prohibits the government from seizing property without due process of law, doesn't really count in the eyes of the court. A prison having a policy of seizing the assets is considered due process. Prisons can even implement a retroactive policy to make the inmate pay it. You're thinking to yourself, no way. They can't do that. Not in the United States, but it's happening. Get on the computer and go right now to www.aelE.org/law/2008 JBAPR/2008 4MLJ301.pdf and read some of the case summaries where it has been done. Remember, Hitler financed much of his war machine with assets he seized from Jews. While furloughs are supposed to be granted to nonviolent inmates who are within 2 years of being released, they will not be granted if the inmate does not sign the financial responsibility form agreeing to pay for the costs of his incarceration. In addition, the Parole Commission will be notified of the inmate's failure to participate. The inmate will not receive performance pay above the maintenance pay level, nor will the inmate be assigned to any work detail outside the secure perimeter of the facility. The inmate will not be allowed to work in Unicor, UNICOR. Unicor is the prison industry for federal prisoners. Each state has a prison industry for state inmates. The list goes on and on. If the inmate works at Unicor or one of the other prison industries, he/she can feel good that the OSHA, Occupational Safety Health Administration, rules, which companies are required to comply with to minimize the risk of injury to the employee, do not apply. If he/she is injured while working within the prison industries, around the prison facilities, or whatever job the prison finds for the inmate, since they are not considered employees of the state, they are not covered by workmen's compensation. But if they were, rules in some states may, and they receive a compensation award for an injury, the state may take a large part of it to cover the costs of incarceration. This also applies if an inmate was injured prior to or after incarceration. Any compensation award may be apprehended. Regular gifts from family or friends to an inmate may also be seized. It is important to note here that unless the judge waived the fine or imposed a fine, which could be as low as $0, which included the cost of incarceration, assets may be taken from the inmate until he has been reduced to poverty level. If the inmate was convicted of crimes prior to November 1st, 1987 and is still in prison, he is referred to as an old law inmate, and the rules are slightly different. An inmate held on the sole basis of his/her inability to pay such a fine and costs, and whose non-exempt property does not exceed $20, may request a discharge from imprisonment on the basis of indigency. See 18 U.S.C. Section 3569. He will not be classed at indigent level if he receives regular gifts from family or friends, which means they can take up to 85% of a regular gift. State laws vary on this, but unless the inmate was wealthy prior to incarceration, he or she stands a large chance of leaving at poverty level. Could this be a plan to eliminate the middle-class citizen? Vending machine prices in the visitor area are higher than machines elsewhere. Telephone rates are higher than elsewhere, and since the calls are often collect calls to family, it adds to the financial burden of family and friends of inmates. It is estimated that inmate calls generate $1 billion or more in revenues each year. A prison typically receives 30 to 40% of all telephone revenue. If an inmate calls home and the child picks up on the extension phone to also talk and listen to dad and mom, That's against the law. The inmate can be disciplined by having phone privileges taken away for several months and spending time in the hole. SHU, Special Housing Unit, isolation. If the inmate received a federal or state felony conviction for possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance which the individual committed after August 22, 1996, he or she is ineligible for food stamps. So not only do we reduce them to poverty, the government removes most of the assistance granted to help Americans in time of need. Inmates at a halfway house are expected to be employed 40 hours per week within 15 calendar days after their arrival. During their stay, they are required to pay a subsistence fee to help defray the cost of their confinement. This charge is 25% of their gross income, not to exceed the average daily cost of their placement into the halfway house. How much does it cost to build a prison? South Carolina's estimate of construction in 2006 dollars by facility type are $100,000 per bed in a maximum security institution, $66,000 per bed in a high security facility, and $62,500 per bed in medium security, and $34,896 per bed in a minimum security housing. Results of incarceration. The right to vote is lost in several states for convicted felons. The right to bear arms is also lost. Why should the nonviolent lose this? 13 states permanently disenfranchise felons so that they may no longer vote. The Supreme Court made it harder, if not impossible, for federal courts to restore gun rights to felons who have served their time. That does not mean that the state cannot restore this right. The primary objective in the mass incarceration of Americans could be this very issue of taking away the right to have guns. Reinstatement of the right to vote in Florida used to require an application to the governor and could take years and still not get approved. Even now, restoration of civil rights can take 15 years in Florida. During this time, the ex-felon cannot get many types of business licenses. That list includes dealer's license for motor vehicles, wrecker operator, law enforcement officer, private investigator, pest control operator, many of the medical field licenses, such as nurse, therapist, paramedic, etc., mortgage broker, title loan lender, retail installment seller, fire equipment dealer, electrical contractor, construction contractor, and numerous other licenses. So not only can the state reduce the ex-felon to poverty with the incarceration fee, they can limit their opportunity to rise out of poverty. Add to this problem, many businesses and most government employers will not hire an ex-felon. Many businesses are reluctant to hire an ex-felon, but most states offer a tax incentive to employ an ex-felon. The federal government also offers a tax break, but usually conditions the tax incentive on the former inmate being at or below poverty level. If he owns property, there is no reason to help him till he loses it and distances himself from the middle class. What can a female inmate expect while incarcerated and when she leaves, in addition to the possibility of the cost of incarceration fee? If she is married and incarcerated for 1 year or more, she can expect to leave divorced. The divorce rate, male and female, for inmates incarcerated a year or more a year or more, is 85%. She stands a strong chance of being sexually abused. For officers in the federal prison system, sexual abuse is only a misdemeanor. If she is at a private prison, sexual abuse is not against the law because the courts do not, under court definition, consider a private prison or halfway house to actually be a prison. Consequently, staff at contractor-owned and operated detention facilities who sexually abuse federal inmates cannot be prosecuted under federal law. If she is at a state prison, the guards will likely only receive a suspended sentence. If she reports sexual abuse and cannot prove it, she could face another year of incarceration for filing a false accusation. Intimidation and fear also prevent her from reporting. Guards sometimes trade contraband for sex. They also are accused of threatening to plant contraband in inmates' belongings or have them transferred to other prisons farther from their families if they talked, the FBI said. She also is at perhaps a greater than 50% chance of leaving with an infectious disease. Since the law won't protect her from the staff officers, she can expect even less protection from other inmates. Why are male guards even allowed into a woman's prison? Or vice versa. In a recent study, female inmates had higher rates of mental health problems than their male counterparts. 61% of females and 44% of males in federal prisons, 73% of females and 55% of males in state prisons, 75% of females and 63% of males in local jails. Studies have linked double bunking and prison overcrowding with higher rates of stress-induced mental disorders, higher rates of aggression, and higher rates of violence. What can the male inmate expect while incarcerated and when he leaves? As mentioned above, if married and incarcerated for 1 year or more, the divorce rate is 85%. Men are not exempt from sexual abuse. Prison staff have laughed at and ignored the pleas of male prisoners seeking protection from rape by other inmates. In July 2003, Congress passed the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003 to study the problem of prison rape. A commission of 9 members were appointed, 3 appointed by the President, and the report was due within 3 years of passage. In July 2006, this commission reported to Congress. It is currently anticipated that the commission's final report will be submitted to the Congress in July 2007. However, as of July 31, 2008, the final report has not been posted on the Commission's website. Let's see. Finish the job means no more traveling the country. Expenses paid with per diem. Congress passing a law or the Attorney General mandating guidelines, which would then only affect federal prisons, based on this study, to help solve the problem of prison rape can wait until the commissioners finish touring the country. The PREA of 2003 has helped some already in that grant money was also tied to the act, offering money to states which take some action to try to reduce prison rape. However, such an offer is unconstitutional, yet has become a normal method of operation for the U.S. government. The federal government taxes citizens at a higher rate than necessary, then offers some of the excess tax in the form of grants to states which do something that Uncle Sam wants. Thereby, they are using this grant money to manipulate state laws and state rights. When the prison rape elimination guidelines are finally issued, they will only apply to federal prisons once adopted. and it will be up to the states if they want to adopt these guidelines to get grant money. Each state needs to go ahead and remedy the problem within their prisons and jails and refuse the grant money. In addition, the representatives of each state should work to stop the revenue sharing started during the Nixon years, voting no to every piece of legislation which includes grant money. Lord willing, we will continue this in the next video, this reading of the Kennel by Elijah Green, who is Kent Hovind. It's in PDF format, $5.99, and you can download it straight from this website. Thank you.